Welcome to the second half of the underappreciated 90s Sci-Fi edition. This episode will be talking about shows that highlighted futuristic technology. As I have discussed in other editions, the rising popularity of cable TV led to science fiction shows growing more and more in demand. The Sci-Fi Channel was formed, and on other stations, shows like The X-Files, Stargate SG-1, Deep Space Nine, and more were huge hits with an ever-increasing audience. But as with all genres, while some shows will rise, others will fall. Some were simply because they were bad, but others because they missed the mark for the time in some way. With a glut of new shows on the market, the stations pruned hard if something didn't make the cut, no matter how good it might be. Those shows often would have done better with minor changes, different time slots, or if made today. Quick side note, if you prefer alien invasions in your science fiction, sorry, you won't find any of those here. Those were covered in the Sci-Fi Alien edition, which you can find on this channel. Link in the description. In this underappreciated 90s edition, I'll be covering shows that highlighted minor changes in technology like Cobra, all the way up to major super tech shows like SeaQuest, DSV, and SuperForce. So join me as we take another trip through the underappreciated 90s, from the death of the mullet to the rise of the internet. Until I began this project, I'd never even heard of this show. A short-lived TV series, Harsh Realm only lasted 9 episodes. In a time when most seasons ran 24 episodes, this one didn't even make half a season. It was created by Chris Carter, the creator of The X-Files, and was shown on Fox for a whopping 3 episodes before being dropped. It was picked up by CBC Country Canada for an additional 6 episodes before they cancelled it as well. Our protagonist is Thomas Hobbs, a lieutenant ordered to test a virtual battle game called Harsh Realm. His goal? To beat the current high scorer in the game, Sergeant Major Santiago, and kill his virtual avatar in the game. What they don't tell him is that Santiago has hijacked the game, turning all of Harsh Realm into his own kingdom. No one knows where his physical body resides in the real world, so their only hope of regaining control over the game and freeing the soldiers trapped inside is for someone to get to Santiago and kill him. In Harsh Realm, everyone from the real world is scanned in, creating a virtual world identical to our own. Only in this world, a terrorist has detonated a massive nuclear bomb, causing a country full of chaos, shortages, and a world where the strong rule and the weak are slaves. Hobbs, played by Scott Bairstow, is a fairly normal hero. He begins the series having been decorated for saving the life of a fellow soldier, is preparing to leave the army and move to California. He has a lovely blonde fiancée and a baby on the way. Inside Harsh Realm, he refuses to give in to the cynicism that has overtaken many of the soldiers, or join Santiago as the rest have done. He is sometimes naive, but learns the rules of the realm quickly without becoming jaded. Still, he is never a merry stew. He loses as many fights as he wins, and his good intentions fail as often as they succeed. He is assisted by Mike Pinocchio, played by D.B. Sweeney, and a mute healer named Florence, played by Rachel Hayward. Pinocchio is a soldier who's been trapped in the Harsh Realm since its early days, and is one of the few men in the game who knows Santiago's true goals. Florence, it is strongly suggested, is an unusual product of the program rather than a real person, with her lack of speech somehow being tied to healing abilities. While it lends the game a slight supernatural feel, her presence never makes the show feel completely ungrounded. Terry O'Quinn plays Major Santiago with his usual acting skill, making a complex character not only believable, but somehow despicable and understandable all at once. As in most amazing movies and television, it's the villain that truly makes or breaks a show, and Harsh Realm is no exception. Santiago is not only complex, but almost superhuman. For those who've read Watership Down, he reminds me a bit of General Woundwort, ruling with a tyrannical fist, but also leading his rabbits to a greatness they never could have created on their own. His people fear him and worship him in equal measure. Santiago is supported by Mel Waters, played by Max Martini. Waters and Hobbs serve together, and while this initially causes some uncertainty between the two men, the lines between them become more firmly drawn as the show continues. While Santiago may be the main antagonist, Waters is the greater study in human nature, as his contrasts with Hobbs become more clearly defined. Lurking behind Santiago and Waters is Inga Fossa, played by Sarah Jane Redmond. What her end goals are is never quite revealed. She seems to play every side. She is the only person besides Santiago able to travel back and forth between the real world and Harsh Realm. She gives secure information to civilians, encourages waters to power, spies on the real world military officers to learn their plans for Santiago, but then doesn't give all the information to him. I found her the most intriguing character, despite her limited screen time, and I wish they'd had more time to develop her mystery. She is clever, smart, and manipulative, and she made me really miss when strong female characters didn't just mean acting like men with breasts. The show got low ratings, mainly due to its dark tone, violence, and harsh language. While none of them is over the top by today's standards, in 1999 they were considered extreme for an 8 o'clock time slot, and not suitable for younger viewers. Additionally, Terry O'Quinn said when he read the script, he was able to understand the basic plot, but he wasn't computer literate, and so found parts of it confusing. This may have been an issue for much of the older viewing audience as well. The show's quality declined slightly in the last few episodes. The fact they were being cancelled is apparent in the copious amounts of exposition, cramming information that should have been spread out. The last episode is just abrupt. Florence isn't even in it. Apparently there was a 10th episode made to give the show some limited wrap-up, but it was never shown, so Harsh Realm just ends. If this were made today with comparable effects and writing, I can't imagine Harsh Realm not being well received. Yes, it has its preachy moments, but like many of the 90s shows, it manages to do so without a lot of screaming and calling people ists. There would be a certain segment unhappy with the portrayal of women, many of whom are protected by physically stronger men and are either enslaved or voluntarily trade themselves for a place to live and food. That much realism might upset some people today, but there are stronger women on both sides of the combat that should not be ignored. The show can be found HD enhanced on YouTube. I highly recommend giving it a shot. TekWar is a futuristic look at a world that hasn't changed much from our own, but has a much higher technological level. Set in 2045, the drug of the day is Tek, a microchip that combines the effects of narcotics and hallucinogens, but can also cause brain damage. The series is basically a cop show set in a high-tech world, but provides an interesting look at how that technology might make police work different. Despite the science fiction look, the whole show is written in a very 90s style, down to every shootout action scene. The hacking scenes are right out of, well, every 90s hacking show or movie. The computers still make the harpy screech of a dial-up tone even. Most of the clothes could have come out of the actors' wardrobes, and some of the guns look old even by today's standards, forget 20 years from now. This book series by William Shatner was popular enough to become a video game, comic book series, and eventually, the 4 made-for-TV movies and a sci-fi TV series. The movies are considered part of the canon, with the 18-episode series taking place after them. This can be confusing for current viewers, since the movies were never released onto DVD in the United States. Many of the fans I know weren't even aware the movies existed. That's a shame. The 4 movies basically make up the show's first season and are better than the 18 episodes that came after them. The series involves Jake Cardigan, a police officer framed for selling tech and the murder of his partners. He is sentenced to 15 years in a cryogenic lockup, but released in 4 through the interventions of an ex-police officer, Sid Gomez, and Walter Bascon, the owner and CEO of a private investigation firm that mainly deals with cases involving tech lords. It's never really explained how this was accomplished, but Bascon wants Cardigan to work for him and was apparently willing to pay to make it happen. 3 out of the 4 movies have an overarching villain, Sonny Hokori. He is the man who framed Jake and spends the first season as the most powerful of the tech lords. Each movie plays into the next to varying degrees. Bascon's real motives are hinted at but never revealed. Sid is an active partner, smart, and enjoys learning the latest gadgets. The relationship between Jake and new love interest Beth develops at a more realistic pace than in most media. The second season sees a lot more 90s tropes, including the bad guy of the week, 90s moralizing, yes, it happened then too, and black cop sidekick who is kind of dumb, likes donuts, and is there to get killed off. The healthy relationship ends in favor of a revolving door of short-term ladies. The episodes became very Monster of the Week in tone, each dealing with a completely different theme bound together only by a gadget-heavy background. Most disappointingly, the mystery of Bascon's motivations seems to disappear completely. Still, some of the ideas were interesting. I'm always a sucker for ethical discussions about sentient machines. I was pleasantly surprised at the way they handled Tori Higginson leaving the show. I had fully expected one of the usual TV tropes to write her out. I wish they'd done more to develop Bascom's mystery, but he still remains an engaging and interesting character throughout, and is probably the most developed of the supporting cast. All in all, TekWar is a mixed bag, but worth a watch if you're a fan of earlier science fiction. Or for that matter, if you enjoy police procedurals. The first and second seasons are available on YouTube, but the quality isn't great. The second season is available on DVD, but I don't recommend it if you haven't seen the movies. If you are lucky enough to live in Canada, both seasons are available on DVD as TekWar: The Complete Series. In 1994, NBC debuted a show by Danny Bilson and Paul DeLeo about a guy fighting crime in a super-tech car. The show was to have originally come out in 1993, but was delayed due to concerns about the level of violence in the show and a lawsuit with a competing show. The competing show was also about a crime-fighting driver, also had a cool red sports car, and was also called Viper. The Bilson and DeLeo Viper actually had the protagonist driving a Dodge Viper, and the car manufacturer had invested heavily in the show, hoping it would sell more cars. They obviously couldn't let this imposter continue developing their show, so things were put on hold during the lawsuit. The end result was that the second Viper show agreed to rename their show Cobra, and ended up releasing in 1993 when NBC had planned to release theirs. Viper ended up running for 4 seasons, though only one of those would be through NBC. Cobra, however, was cancelled in a single season through one of those strange, fickle turns that television takes. By all logic, it should have done better. Viper wasn't bad, and both shows get about the same ratings on Amazon, although Viper gets more recognition and therefore more ratings. However, Cobra was released first. It had the more popular lead star, and, in my opinion, the far cooler car. In addition, the marketing was brighter, the intro more upbeat, and the graphics more eye-catching. So what went wrong? First, for a high-tech crime-fighting show, it wasn't very high-tech. You have a guy magically brought back after being shot in the head, a complete facial reconstruction, new identity, and a souped-up car, but that was par for the course in 90s entertainment. Viper also had little futuristic technology, but the car did turn into a tank, usually off-screen, or in the dark. Still, it had the Cobra beat since it did something unique. Cobra just didn't have the over-the-top futuristic feel of most of the other entries on this list. It had a small budget to work with, and one of the complaints at the time was it was just another flashy car cop show. I even gave serious thought to doing an underappreciated 90s cop shows episode and including it there. Unfortunately, it was just techy enough it wouldn't quite have made that category in any believable way either. The plots are also dependent on a lot of narration, which can get old if you binge too many episodes in a row. Scandal Jackson is either keeping a diary as the show unfolds, or his internal monologue is very weird. I wonder if he had his own internal theme music. Michael Dudikoff was known for his action scenes, so fights in the show are common, and for such a low-budget show, decently done. At least once a show, viewers could be promised a display of martial arts prowess, mullet and all. The plots weren't entirely predictable, which was a relief, but there were plenty of complaints, even in the 90s, that some of the dialogue tended to be cheesy. In short, in an era where over-the-top was the key to a show being seen as proper sci-fi, Cobra was just too down-to-earth. Dealing with actual problems of the time instead of cyborgs and cybercrime, science fiction viewers wanted something more fantastic. Had Cobra gone a little more real life, it likely would have made a fun police procedural. Had it done a more tech-heavy plotline, it would have appealed to fans of Knight Rider and the like. As it was, it never slotted firmly into any audience's wheelhouse enough to be a hit. For those looking to give it a watch, it became available on DVD through Mill Creek Entertainment in 2009. This show is every cheesy, terribly awesome stereotype of the 80s and early 90s.
How much cheese is too much cheese? Any amount of cheese.
SuperForce ran for 2 seasons from 1990 to 1992, taking place in 2020 and full of classic cars, over-the-top action, terrible acting, and mullets. SuperForce is another futuristic, tech-powered cop show, and it's so terrible it's great. Zack Stone, played by Ken Oland, is an astronaut turned police officer seeking to clear his brother's name of corruption charges. He fights crime in the Crime Zone, how's that for creative naming, which may have been a callback to Boston's Combat Zone of the 1970s. Unlike the Combat Zone, though, which was mainly known for adult entertainment, the Crime Zone is a haven for violence of all crimes, from blunt weapons to guns to flamethrowers. Zach's secret identity is SuperForce, basically a tech-powered superhero with super strength, snazzy vehicles, and the ability to get out of his complex armor faster than Clark Kent can become Superman. Initially, Zach has a suit which makes him stronger, faster, and able to take a hit. In addition, he's given access to incredible amounts of information fed to him by a super AI and a souped-up motorcycle. His equipment gets free maintenance by way of his mandatory 90s token black sidekick tech genius, FX Skinner. The show is very tech-heavy, with references to Bond and MacGyver being added.
I don't like how meta this is getting, Rick!
This meets Skinner's role, while a secondary one is pretty substantial. Skinner isn't the only attempts to update the show for the expectations of the time. Several of the police officers and the captain are the early girl bosses of their time. Tough, ass-kicking, and able to wield machine gun pistols with one hand. But it was still the 90s, so the policewomen did their job on crime-ridden streets in leather miniskirts, and the captain dresses like a new wave model and spends a lot of time bemoaning her lost love to her employees. The villain of the show is Tao Satori. Played by real-life criminal George Gordon Liddy, Satori is a mustache-twirling, plotting, Bond-style type villain. Rather than stroking a cat, though, Satori is pictured as practicing Eastern-style meditations and spouting off quiet wisdom in loose, silky-looking clothing. There might have been a bit of an Eastern equals evil thing going on in the 90s.
What do you think?
The show was only 30 minutes, including commercials, but the pilot was over an hour long. All the information given set up the rest of the series well, though, and there wouldn't have been a good spot in the script to break it up into smaller chunks. The episode guide does list the pilot as episodes 1 through 4, though, so at some point in syndication I suppose this must have happened anyway. Season 2 of SuperForce saw Zach becoming a lot more super. After a near-death experience, he gets a magical hookup with his AI and becomes faster, stronger, smarter, and develops ESP, because apparently a smart computer can give you muscle bulk and psychic powers in 2020. And you thought not having hoverboards by now was a problem. It's hard to find an official reason for SuperForce's cancellation, but considering it's gloriously cheesy even for a decade known for its cheese, it's easy to see where the constipation might kick in around Season 2.
I was very constipated.
Season 2 took what was at its core a basic police show and turned it into a mix of ghosts, aliens, and immortal monsters. This show is still well enough recognized, I almost didn't include it. 3 seasons is also normally past my threshold to be considered underappreciated. However, I'm a sucker for a great production hell story, and at the rate NBC dropped shows in the 90s, the fact that this show made 3 seasons is a miracle.
What happened here was a miracle.
Season 1 was pretty much a grounded science fiction show, with emphasis on science. The original goal was to set the show in the near future and imagine a world and technology that might be reasonably realistic. Okay, there was a talking dolphin, submarine pirates, and the sunken Library of Alexandria, but for a 90s sci-fi TV show, at least they tried, right?
But I tried, didn't I? God damn it. At least I did that.
The cast of Season 1 included Roy Scheider as Captain Bridger. He was the star of a number of roles through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the most famous of which is the original summer blockbuster Jaws. Scheider would be the star for the first 2 seasons before leaving for, creative differences. Stephanie Beacham is Dr. Westphalen, the head scientist on SeaQuest. She and the more militaristic members of the crew often bump heads. She isn't the worst of the scientific team when it comes to balancing the military purpose of SeaQuest with her own research projects, though. Beachman was only with the show for Season 1, leaving when it was decided that filming would move to Florida in order to cut costs. Jonathan Brandis played Lucas Lucas was the Wesley Crusher of SeaQuest, a boy tech genius who existed primarily to draw the younger generation into the show. Brandeis pulled in as many as 4,000 letters a week from fans.
But shut up, Wesley.
Though based on what we now know about young adult fandoms, the age of those fans might be less certain. The secondary cast is long in the first season. In Season 2, many of the cast were cut, but this was mainly to bring in younger actors, rather than to reduce the numbers. In fact, the entire show was plagued by staff fluctuations, whether due to modifications in the script, production moves, or disagreements between the cast and producers. By the end of the show, only Ted Raimi and Brandeis had remained through the entire run. During Season 2, the show took quite a shift, leaving behind the science for a heavier fiction emphasis. This was an unsuccessful attempt to boost ratings. Instead of plot lines about unknown bacteria, disputes over ocean rights and pollution, the story began to involve alien spaceships, fire-breathing worms, and the ever-dreaded time travel storyline. Despite the failure of the attempt, this was a move that other TV leaders would, for some reason, also think was a good idea. Many of the actors were unhappy with the changes, the most outspoken being Roy Scheider himself. You see, in the 90s, companies hadn't figured out that making actors sign Be Nice contracts was a thing they could do. After Roy Scheider said in an interview that he considered the second season to be childish trash, I doubt anyone was surprised when he didn't return for Season 3. Season 3 gave the audience a 10-year time jump. More of the cast were let go or asked to be let out of their contracts because of dissatisfaction with the way the show was going. After initially turning down the role, Michael Ironsides took over as the captain of the SeaQuest. His requirement was that the show needed to move away from the more outlandish storylines, resulting in writers attempting to balance the atmosphere of the first and second seasons. The show became less light in tone, and while the third season overall got good reviews, it was too little too late. After limping along for 3 seasons as one of the most expensive shows of its day, SeaQuest DSV finally ended in June of 1996. Thank you for watching. Did I miss an underappreciated sci-fi tech show I could have included? Please let me know in the comments. If there are enough of them, maybe we'll do a part 2. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, or let me know what you'd like to see done differently. You can find a deeper dive into some other underappreciated shows on my Monday night live stream, Shows You've Never Seen. Currently, we are looking at the 2003 HBO drama Carnival on the 2nd and 4th Monday of each month at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please join us. And in the meantime, happy headbutting.